Hey, Sam, you come up with that intro line?
You didn't tell me that was today.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Writers' Room with Sam and Jim. This is the show, as you know, where we invite aspiring writers onto our podcast for a little writers' room here to help them work on and develop their stories. And you can help us out by going to Apple Podcasts and hitting the subscribe button. Better yet, you can rate and review us. You can also join the conversation that we're having on Facebook at The Writers' Room with Sam and Jim, or you can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at The Sam and Jim. Now, we're going to break some story with Marc Brockwell in just a few minutes, but before that, there's something I really want to go off about, Sam. Ready? Okay, so Sammy, what I want to talk about is zombie ideas, right? When you're a writer, everybody wants to know, where do you get your ideas? Where do they come from? But what I want to talk about are these ideas that you just can't get rid of. They won't leave you alone. You try and kill them, and they keep coming back to eat your brain.
Sometimes they're terrible ideas that we individually won't let go of, and the other person is just like, all right, he's got to talk about this for about 15 minutes. I'm just going to nod, and hopefully he'll get past it. There's some of those. Some fall into that category, certainly.
For sure. And over the years, when we first started off, we had this red binder. And we would fill it with all the ideas that we had, and for some reason they couldn't work, or Sam liked them and I hated them, or vice versa. Stick them in the red binder. Someday we're going to get back to those. And you go back and you look at these old ideas that you had, and some of them you're just like, no, that was Sam was right. That was a really bad idea. You don't have any connection with them anymore.
Yeah, well, one of them was called Temptation Island. We're not going into it, but that one
we're trying to be as commercial as we could possibly get to try to sell something.
Who you calling we, Jim Dunn?
So then there's these other ideas, right? These zombie ideas that, like, they've taken a bite out of you. They're outside your door. They're scrabbling at your window, trying to get inside, and you carry them around with you no matter where you go. You just can't get them out of your head. So there's this zombie idea that's been bugging us. It's been pawing at us now for 17 years. We took a swing at it, and it wasn't quite right. And we didn't know really why at the time. We couldn't make it make sense. And then here it is, 17 years later. Along the way, we keep having this idea pop up. And we'd have conversations about it. We'd talk about it. Every 3 years, this idea would jump back to life.
And we're both completely into it. It's not like one person is dragging the other one and down this.
Which is how you know that it's a real zombie idea, right? It wasn't one of us saying, would you stop bringing up that damn idea? I hate it.
Right.
So we sit down, we decide we're going to write something just for ourselves, just to make ourselves love writing again, hear our own voices, do something we really want to do. And out of that whole binder full of ideas, what do we start writing? It's this one idea that we've already written before. Right.
Now it's a completely different take on it. That's what's so interesting.
And I was thinking about this, and I think it's in part because it is 17 years later. We are completely different writers. We're different people. We've lived different lives. Mm-hmm. The skills and the thoughts we're bringing to how do you live, what makes this story interesting? It's a completely different angle than we took the first time around.
Yeah, it feels fresh. I mean, it could feel fresh because I don't remember a goddamn thing about that original thing because it was so long ago. But it does feel fresh. It feels, first of all, we changed the lead. That was the number one thing we did. We changed the lead.
Yeah. Yeah, and the whole sort of approach to the story is different in terms of how you immerse yourself in the story and what's interesting as an audience to what do you want to see happen in this world.
Right. So we've been working on it for weeks now. And what, Jim Dunn, is the thing that has surprised you or that you like the most about it? That's different from 17 years ago.
I think the most interesting thing to me is how much more emotional it is this time around. We're not writing for jokes. We're not writing for, spooky plot points where something exciting happens. We're writing for the emotional truth of the characters and what's happening to them.
Yeah, we're going to have to fix that, though.
God knows. and maybe this is the version that finally gets made. But I think that if nothing else, we're finally giving it this second shot, right? And if it doesn't work, at least maybe this time when we kill it, it'll stay dead, and it won't be banging on the goddamn door for another 17 years.
Because we ain't writing it again. Let's say that.
Okay, let's get into this week's show.
Hi, Mark. This is Sam.
Hi, Sam.
Hi, this is Jim.
Hey, Jim.
Welcome. Thank you for coming here so we can sit here and attack your idea mercilessly until you decide finally by the end of the half hour to completely give up writing, which is our new goal.
We're trying to save people from themselves.
Right, and basically kill people's dreams. So let's let's get going with that. So
I was going to say that's a pretty smart way to do it, but I'm game. Thank you so much for having me.
You know, it's all people in Hollywood do is try to kill dreams.
I was interviewed on a podcast, Screaming to the Abyss, just a few days ago, and one of the questions was, after, they talk about all the challenges. They talk about the dark times of writing, all the terrible stuff that happens along the way. And so I went into the story and I told this, how hard it was, with, we had businesses go out of business and we had this going on, all this stuff happening, and getting served with papers, not getting a job for a number of years. And then Dan, one of the hosts, said, "So why did you keep going?" And I don't think I had a good answer, because after all of that, there's no actual answer that makes any sense. You just how do you explain that you just happen to like doing this thing?
Well, I think for us at a certain level, it was, God, we threw all that other stuff away. We'd better make this work.
Yeah, and Jim went out and bought I don't know how to switch careers for dummies kind of book. At one point, I mean, this is going back about 15 years, but it was like that, it was like, well, we've been here a few years and maybe we should, this is not working. And
then the financial crash happened. It's like, oh, good. All the things I thought I might be able to do have just disappeared. I was going to sell shit. Well, nobody's buying anything.
Yeah. And so we were living off our wives, which, in Jim's case, almost worked. She was doing well, but my wife is a part-time teacher. So I thought the number one piece of advice for writers is to marry a financial, stockbroker, something like that. Right. Marry a doctor.
Marry money, because you're not going to make it, most likely.
Yeah, for a while.
At least for a while.
Yeah. So I now that we have completely dragged everything down, let's bring it back up to your idea.
This better make you $1 million. That's what we're saying.
Yeah, I don't know how I can follow that one right there. That's a tough one.
Well, Mark, why do you want to write? And I see him. JR had put in his little notes that you went to film school, and so why? Film school is expensive. You got this idea. You're going to be writing for some stretch of time without making a buck. So what's making you keep going right now?
Well, basically kind of growing up, I always like to make people laugh. When you laugh, it's like the only moment in time that you're not really thinking about anything else. You're like truly present in what's making you happy. And so if I could give that to people and I could take away a second or a half second of just any relief or any anxiety or stress that's going on in their life, that made me happy to do. And then once I kind of figured out, TV shows that make me laugh have writers, and that's a job and that's a career, I'm like, yeah, I want to do everything I can to make a career out of it and do that. So that's kind of what drives me to it. I want to make people laugh. I want to give people relief from like the stresses and anxieties of everyday life. And if I could do that by TV writing, that's kind of, where I found my happy place.
That's a beautiful answer. And I love what you said about laughing. Where everyone that's here was nodding at that point. So right, you don't think about anything else. And Jim has a big laugh, and we laugh. We used to laugh a lot.
No, it's mostly crying.
No,
which is a release too in its own way.
Well, actually, we had a moment yesterday where Jim and I are writing a pilot, and we're writing this one for ourselves. We didn't pitch it to anybody. We're just going to write it. Even our agent was like, you don't need to write this pilot. You can just go pitch it. And we're like, no, we need to write it because we want to reconnect with our voice. And we don't quite know what that is anymore because we've been working on other people's shows doing their voice, which we enjoyed. But let's see if we can do one of our voice.
What do we want to sound like now? Because it's been a while.
Right. And yesterday, after breaking the story on this over and over and over, and for a couple of weeks, it only took 2 or 3 weeks, and then we got it down. Now we're going to draft, and usually we then go into our homes and we split it up, and then I send them scenes as I write them, and then we put it together, we read it, and we talk about it. This time we said, we're going to write a few scenes, then we're going to look at each other's work, and we're going to talk about it as we sort of course correct as we go. Because we don't know what we sound like. And we need to figure out what the characters sound like, but also we need to sound like, figure out what we sound like. And I was writing yesterday, and I was trying to describe something, and I made myself laugh.
Can you do the line?
I don't remember the line. So, but it wasn't even a dialogue. It was just a description of a place. And what Jim and I decided was we're going to write too big. we're going to write a little too much, like a Spinal Tap reference. We're going to turn it up to 11, and then we'll tune it back, because a lot of times I feel like it's just the facts, ma'am, and then you end up a little dry. You end up kind of like without a soul. And then the next draft, you're like, all right, I got to put some verve into this descriptions and all that. And I thought, let's just start it. So I laughed, and then Jim's sitting 10 feet away, and he's like, what's so funny? And I told him, and he laughed. And then I said, all right, I'll dial that back. I'll take it out. And he's like, no, don't take that out. It may or may not be right, but let's just uncork it for this one. Yeah. And by the way, this is not a comedy that we're writing. I should say that.
It's actually got a lot of like crime thriller in it.
Yeah, it's a lot of crime thriller, but we wanted to get attitude. We wanted, when people read it, to be like, okay, these guys have a voice. And now we're just trying to figure out exactly what that voice is. But in that moment of laughing, not only you're right, I separated from it a little bit, but I also felt like, oh, this feels good. I want to do more of this. And then I'm now setting out to make Jim laugh when he reads the damn thing. And not necessarily laugh like it's funny, but laugh because it's right. There's an attitude.
There's a piece of truth in there somewhere that resonates.
Yeah. I don't know if any of that made sense, and JR will cut it all out. So let's get into your idea. Why don't you tell us about your thing, and then let's hear about that.
Sure. It's the best way to start. It's currently untitled. I'm sure you hear that a ton. But essentially, the bare bones logline is, this white collar asshole is fresh out of federal prison for a multi-million-dollar security fraud scheme, and he has no choice but to return to his old high school job as a golf caddy at the country club he used to caddy at.
Right. I get the show, actually. Now, of course, it can entirely... Well, first of all, that's what I want to do.
Right. It's the rough. It's in the bag. It's
yeah.
You mean the title?
Right.
No.
Yeah.
That's what I'd right. I worked at Mrs. Fields Cookies in high school. I would love to go work at Mrs. Fields Cookies. All you do is you take the scoop, you put it on the tray, you put it in the oven, you come out, they're delicious. You sneak one while you turn your back to the customer. Then you go back, you try to do the whole thing without chewing. It just I figured this is I want to do it. Why golf?
Why golf? Well, they say write what you know. I love golf. I love being out there. There's such a golf culture. I personally wasn't a caddy, but growing up in high school and even before that, all of my good friends were caddies. And they would tell me stories about because there's a lot of downtime, in between going out and interacting with the members. They're all kind of in the caddy shack. And they'd always tell me so they'd be anywhere from 13 to 16, 17 years old. But there'd always be like an older gentleman or a couple just still working there with them, and they'd have kind of very interesting interactions. And I thought, okay, what if you put this guy who's made his millions, he's been at the top, he's definitely shouldn't be doing this, and now he's in it with these kids, and it's a redemption story, right? This guy has to figure out what to do with his life, get his life back on track, and the only way he can do it is resorting to the same high school job he had, and just the kind of the world of golf and caddies. It's so unique, especially because it's that blend of the world he used to live right at a country club, but now he's doing it from the other side, and when he's lost everything.
If he's on work release or parole or something, you call it caddy shackles.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, Mark, I want to make sure that you don't listen to anything that Jim says about any of this. Okay.
Yeah, of course.
Especially with titles. The
milieu is good.
Yeah. Golf, not my thing. But then again, neither is soccer. I mean, who the hell is anybody actually a fan of soccer? I mean, who watches this sport? But look at Ted Lasso.
Right.
And of course I'm joking. It's funny because I have my soccer ref uniform right to the right of me because after this podcast I have to go ref. But I will say it's not about the golf. It's just like Ted Lasso is not about the soccer, right?
Absolutely not. No, that's just a vehicle for the interactions to kind of happen. It's this guy's redemption story and the blend between the world he used to live and the world he's living now.
So I have a couple questions for you, but first I have to ask you, have you ever seen the original Walter Matthau Bad News Bears?
Oh, no.
Okay. This is in the Wayback Machine. Okay. This is way, way back. I've seen it in repeats, but the thing that's so great about it is that all the kids, and this is South Park did a little bit this decades later, of course, but they're really the interaction of the grown-ups and the kids, it's smoking, it's cursing, it's spitting, it's hilarious. And when they remade it, decades later, they cleaned all that out. You know, it was a much sweeter, like, oh, it's the misfits who don't quite fit in. But when it was Bad News Bears, the original, it was a 70s kind of grit to it.
Mm-hmm.
If you're going to have this guy hanging out with teenagers or 13-year-olds even, then what's their interaction like? That seems to me a huge source of stuff.
The weird thing is that, like, what all my friends would tell me is there was grit. Like, they would be smoking joints and playing cards and gambling, like, as 13, 14-year-olds with so much downtime in the caddy shack with these older men that came in and kind of showed them the ropes of how to be degenerate. And so if they're showing him up, that's kind of another source of conflict, culture shock that could come to that way. So there's definitely grit. And I love when kids swear. I think it's
yeah.
You know, a lot of people don't, but I think there's great comedy if done right when kids land the perfect swear, because, you know, it's the marriage of what's supposed to happen in life and what's not supposed to happen in life perfectly. Child swearing.
Yeah.
So I think if done right with grit, I think it could be good.
Well, there's your title right there, is Child Swearing.
Yeah.
So here's the obvious question. Why is this the worst thing ever to happen to, what's this guy's name, by the way?
Tom Snedeker.
Okay, so why is this Tom Snedeker's worst thing that's ever happened to him? Specific to him, not what a drop from the heights of et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, I mean, specific to him, he's lost all his money and he has built his fortune. He was a hedge fund manager in one of these white-collar Wall Street, Greenwich, Connecticut, New York. Like, he's a Jordan Belfort type guy. So when Jordan Belfort loses everything that happens to him, I think it's the worst thing because he can't have access to any of the life he used to have. Mm. He's totally, besides assets and wealth, his family is gone. The people he trusted are gone. The parties are, like, everything he knows has been taken away except for his best friend, Scott McLaughlin, who's the caddy master at this, who's still there, the two of them caddied as kids in high school. He's still there, and he's the one that gives him this job and this opportunity because no one else, he can't even get hired at the local grocery store because he's a federal, he's a felon, technically.
Wow. So if I were to meet him, what would he be like?
You meet him before he went to prison or after?
Both. Well, after, because since
we're living in the after, right?
Yeah, so just the after, I guess.
I think, and this is where I'm trying to decide his lane is I don't know at what point he becomes truly sorry and remorseful for his embezzlement and his white-collar asshole tendencies, because if it was, he's still trying to have this bravado of he can get on his helicopter and fly to Saint-Tropez whenever he wants, he'd be quite the asshole to you if he knew you couldn't provide him anything that would be, selflessly beneficial to him. But if he's at this point where he's kind of swallowed his pride and trying to get back on track, I think his tendencies of when he was a 13-year-old kind of grinding from nothing, he made his first dollar as a caddy, right? So if those tendencies come out, I think he'd be a much different person. So I'm trying to really kind of figure out this character drive of at what point he kind of swallows his pride. Is it taking the job? Is it after having the job for a little bit?
Right. I think there's a remarkable inconsistency in what you're saying that I think is really going to open this up. And then I want to pitch you an idea. The inconsistency is I love hearing children curse. You're talking about a show that's got it's edgy. It's got that element. It seems like you're appealing to that. That makes you laugh, right? Mm-hmm. And then you've got a guy who's on this redemption arc, which is that seems like it softens the edge a little bit. I would say this is a guy that has no redemption, doesn't want to be redeemed. This is the job, and he's a total dick. But what's happening is that he is against his will and maybe not that much incrementally doing good things in spite of himself.
Yes. Yeah.
Right? Because then he can be a dick and he can be hilarious that way. But he's not a monster, and so he might help this kid in a dick way. Right? I'm thinking of a show called The Other Two. I don't know if you've watched that on HBO, but when you start out with the main characters, the other two, a brother and a sister who's much younger brother, 13-year-old brother, they're probably in their late 20s or 30, and their much younger brother gets Instagram famous and becomes kind of a pop sensation, and they're kind of left behind, and they're both dicks,
self-absorbed.
Yeah, and the thing that's great about it is I've watched almost 2 seasons now, and they remain dicks. But But they have souls. They love their younger brother, which we find out in the first episode, so I'm connected with them because of that. But the writers did not in episode 2 say, okay, we've shown that in their hearts they're not completely off. There's a slice of goodness to them. So let's now make them good, better and better and better. No, because that's not funny. They are still themselves. And I don't believe that Tom Schmeckelbecker, well, I'm going to change his name. I don't believe that Tom is going to, oh my God, this is like 80s movies to me. It's like Tom has realized that he needs to change. And now he's a good guy trying to convince the world that he's a changed man.
Right.
Nah, man.
Well, and I'm interested to see this character rubbing up against these teenage caddies that he's working with. At the same time, he's dealing with rich people, club members who I presume used to be his clients, or at least might know of him and what happened to him, right? Like that he might be trying to work to somehow get back to the heights he once had. Like, it's an interesting conundrum.
Yeah,
that's the world. The entire kind of country club that obviously knows. I was kind of toying. Was he also once a member? Does he obviously know the members? His wife left him for a member. There's definitely connections there.
Everything that humiliates him would be good.
Right.
1,000%. And don't worry about the logic in the beginning.
Yeah,
you can make the logic,
but pile on this guy. Everything that rubs his face in the dirt is what you want.
Yeah, he's Michael Milken. He's Enron dude, Skilling. He's all those guys, and so no one will hire him. And the only reason the country club will hire him is that the guy who runs it hates him.
That's a nice reversal. I went the other way. That's great.
Because he hates him, and he's going to drive him into dirt. And now he's got an antagonist right there. By the way, some of these mother lovers that are at the country club, they want his expertise, and I'm not talking about golf, all right?
Yeah.
I mean, the guy made a lot of money, and he got out of some sticky situations until he didn't.
Right. Do I want a sandwich here or a collateralized debt obligation? Can you give me a little hint?
Yeah, exactly. There's a little of that going on too, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's a lot of stuff. I would just, I think you sail right into it, right? I mean the mean, but still redeem it. I don't like personally watching just straight out mean, cringy kind of stuff.
I don't either. And just overall as a writer, I have a tough time kind of nailing the nuance. I don't try to be too extreme on one side, but it definitely it's hard to kind of get that perfect mix of he's not a total dick, but he's not soft as a teddy bear.
I'd see. Don't be a coward, Mark. Don't be wishy-washy. Don't worry about nuance. Nuance is for a draft. I would say just turn it to 11. And obviously, Jim and I started out by saying we're in 11 mode right now.
Yeah.
So I reserve the right to completely change my mind. But
you get characters like Ari Gold, right, or William Macy's character on Shameless. Right. Who's the dad of a family, and he's a totally irresponsible fucking prick and an alcoholic and drug user and all that stuff, right? Like, just live in. You need your couple points of connection to something, right? Like it's the baby brother and the two siblings from the other two. Whether it's one of these caddies he knows for some reason, or he's just flashing back to when he was 13 and got stiffed by someone for the first time, and that forms a bond with somebody.
Yeah.
Something.
Yeah, that's right. And he's still a dick about it. But his intention is, I need to fix this thing for this person.
Without redeeming himself, he does something kind as a throwaway.
It's inadvertent redemption.
Yeah.
We can cast about for this all. But you see what we're saying a little bit?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, so don't hold back. And I got to tell you, when you start talking about redemption and cleanup and all this stuff, I think you're swimming against a tide.
Yeah. You start to feel like you're moving through deep water. That's right. It's like you're swimming in syrup.
Right, because it's sweet treacle syrup. Whereas if you go the other way, you can always dial that back. Forget dial that back. You can always leaven it with redemptive things. All right, so let me ask you a question. Who's the I don't know if there is one, but I suspect there is. Who's his love interest?
That was a tough one. I was trying to figure out more character drive and world and love interest, so I haven't given too much thought. His ex-wife, he did have an ex-wife who was a total gold digger, who I kind of imagined is now finds herself with another investment banker just to, keep herself. Didn't really care for him too much, just need to move on. So is he trying to get her back? Does he actually love her? I don't even want to say the cart girl. That's an awful, awful thing to pitch. So to be completely honest, love interest hasn't even come to the forefront of my mind.
In the cart girl world, though, what jumped into my mind was if there's say a woman who works at the country club who manages the caddies, right? And it's someone who's in a position that he has no respect for. There's not a world he has any interest in, and yet he has to work with her, and you could have an attraction there that's building.
Yeah.
Even though, like, she's completely wrong for him and all the metrics that he would normally apply to any situation, but it's getting under his skin.
Well,
yeah.
Let me interrupt. I'm sorry. Just to no, actually, go ahead. I'm sorry. You go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, like, in terms of females, I had a plan, like, one of the girls, like, caddies was a 13-year-old girl that would just show him up in every metric and kind of be this whole world of, oh, it's 2021. He doesn't have to be she can be one of the guys. So in terms of kind of breaking that all male divide, I did have a little female.
No, I was, I'm going to go a little deeper here, and say, he committed this huge fraud, this big crime, whatever he did. And does your family stick by you? Does your wife stick by you when you do those things? How do you look her in the face? How did Bernie Madoff look his wife in the face? What was their conversation after he told her it was all a lie, right? And the reason I find that I'm interested in that for this character is he's got to deal with that. So yeah, he might have this, we could do the stereotypical screechy ex-wife mad at him and divorcing him, trying to find the money, or it could be the devastation that he wrought, which I think would, especially if he has kids, how would that be?
Well, and to go adjacent to what you're saying, Sam, why did he do this? Why did he become this guy, right? Like, what was he answering for himself? Because that goes to who he's been associated with. Who was his wife? Why did he live this life? Why did he do what he did? And now he's in this reset moment. He's trying to get it back again. What's driving him?
Right.
Yeah, and I mean, my kind of thoughts behind that were he did all of this to provide for his family a better life than he had growing up. He had an alcoholic dad, a stay-at-home mom. He only made his bucks kind of caddying, and that's kind of what put him through. He was very driven, determined, studied, got this incredible, hedge fund career, and he wanted to provide for his family a better life than he had growing up. So all of the embezzlement was for a good reason, but it just kind of got carried away, and that's a great point. How do his kids look at him now? How does his ex-wife look at him now if it's from that devastation angle? So I kind of had that he wanted to do it to provide for good reasons, but it totally changes that.
Well, and I got to call you out on that because your main character stole to provide for his family. I mean, that's not funny, but that's not a unique character right there.
Right.
I mean, and you could do it. I'm not in any way saying absolutely it's not binary. It's all taste, but I'm just trying to give you the most fodder when you sit down to do it. And having a guy providing for his family, that's most guys I know, right? So what's this? This guy did it for some other reason. Like Bernie Madoff, man, what was his deal? And I watched the movie, the documentary, I read about it all, and I don't know that anybody cracked really why he did it. Was it pride that, he wanted to, and he loved everyone?
Pure ego.
Yeah, I mean, people were fighting to give him money. What did he feel at those points? And then how did he feel when he was sitting there with his sons who were running this company and probably had no idea what was going on? And then when he had to sit down and tell his sons, and one of them ended up killing himself, what happened? I mean, I'm fascinated with that. Now, obviously, we want to keep the suicide out of the comedy.
Right. Unless it's a really funny suicide.
But there's your title right there. But what can you do? What can you do with him to at least get that thing that he was and maybe still is? That's just not that pretty.
Yeah.
Whatever it was. And the guy, just him being a dick, and he liked to fly to Vegas and get hookers and spend $1,000 on a bottle of wine. That certainly could be an element of it, but that's not a character. The Jim's question is right, which is why? What's he making up for in his life? For me, I always wonder with financial guys, what's their motivation? Do they? There's got to be some guys who just love the process of making money, but at the end of the day, all they do is make money.
Yeah.
And a lot of them, they don't actually provide a value to the world. It's just They get a fee for moving one thing to another thing, so that some rich people can make more money. There are people who are working in banking industry, and we need them. I'm not trying to dismiss an entire sector.
But they didn't leave a single penny on the table.
Right.
And that's what they live for, is getting that extra nickel the other guy didn't get.
Right. Or the hedge fund who they take all these big fees, and then all they do is, or corporate raiders where they're just stripping companies, and all they're doing for is money. And it can't just be money. It just can't sustain I just don't believe that could sustain somebody the whole time, unless they're a little dumb in some ways. But if they are smart guys, what in their person, and I shouldn't say just guys, men and women, what's their driver? Their internal driver. It's got to be something. Are they really that empty?
No, there has to be some level of greed and ego and something behind that to kind of, again, that's like the character engine that I'm really trying to develop here.
Right.
Right.
And I don't think it has to be that deep. I don't think you need to create a storyline that is so intense. And I'm worried that, you sit there, we all sit here and we freight so much stuff on a character, and then you're trying to write a scene and you're like, well, how do I get in the fact that his mom yelled at him in third grade into this scene? And you're like, you're not going to, Sam.
But you get the pivot when some golfer's yelling at the young other caddy, whatever, right? And like he suddenly jumps in to defend the caddy, and you're like, why is he doing that?
Right.
10 episodes later, or later in that episode, you learn that his dad yelled at him a lot.
Yeah.
And I think that it should be a little bit of a surprise. And, Ted Lasso's on right now, so we'll talk about that. This happens in writers' rooms all the time, by the way. Whatever's hot, everybody's talking about.
So it's the lens he used.
Yeah, right, it's just a lens. And then it goes away, and then there's a new lens in a month. But for Ted Lasso, I assume you're watching that show, because I assume you are, right?
Yeah, I have I have the last episode to watch. I'm saving it for tomorrow.
Well,
so.
I'm not gonna ruin anything, but I'm just gonna say in season 1, this is the most likable guy.
Oh yeah,
in the world, right? Everybody likes this guy. He means nothing but goodness. He's so thoughtful, and everybody wants to be with him except his wife, who can't take it anymore. And is out. And she was nice. She was a nice person that just didn't work out. And I thought that was such a nice thing. Yeah. Like, this is a lovely, thoughtful, attentive husband, and she just doesn't love him anymore. And I was like, well, I didn't see that coming. And it obviously is causing him a lot of pain. And now in season 2, we're learning a lot more, but it's very interesting. It's unexpected, right? So if you're going to say, oh, this is some corporate raider or white collar assholes, what's written on my sheet, and if he's that guy, well, I'm going to expect him to be a greedy, blah, 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 blah. What am I not going to expect? Yeah,
absolutely.
And that's all that matters.
No, for sure. Thank you, guys. Yeah.
No, all we're doing is asking questions, man. We're doing no work. You're doing all the work. And just so you know, we beat up on each other and our ideas just as hard.
Well, that's the way it should be, because that's, if you don't beat it up, you never... It's like mining for diamonds. You gotta pressure the coal.
Right.
So let me ask you one more question.
Absolutely.
Where are you going to leave this guy at the end of episode 1 after what we just talked about? Where are you feeling like? What's the end of the pilot? And what's the driver? What's going to keep us going for another 10 episodes this season?
Yeah. No, that's a great question. I honestly,
I've had that same answer to that question before myself.
Yeah. I think I don't know. I'm trying to, because obviously the golf is not the main thing about this, and I don't want this to become a golf heavy show. Of course, I want it to be there, but it's like, how much golf can we have in an episode? Like, I think in a pilot, he has to go out at least once just to see him, like, kind of back in that element. But is it too much to kind of end the pilot about to go on his first, loop back out? So I don't exactly know, but I think the drive is that, now this is his world. I have him living, because, he can't get a place. So his buddy, who's the caddy master, he sets him up living with the Latino gardeners that live at the club as well, in their little, like, kind of bunker they have. And so that's kind of his, he becomes friends or he has to make friends with the gardening staff. And funny, like, they're always drinking like he used to always drink. So it wasn't so hard to kind of make friends, but that's kind of like, maybe he's crying. Maybe he cries for the first time that in life,
Yeah.
The divorce didn't make him cry. The going to prison didn't make him cry. But now the realization that this is his life again makes him cry. I don't know. And he could have a total baby cry that's hysterical for a comedy. But I don't know.
Can I pitch you a little idea that jumped in my head while you were saying that?
Please do.
Well, I was just thinking, and this goes to, and this is probably not right, but it could be something adjacent anyway. But I was thinking, when I was 16 at Christmas, my family used to have big poker games at holidays. Mm-hmm. And we got into this game. Long story short, I wound up losing all of the Christmas money all my relatives had given me playing this poker game. It was the first year I was allowed in, and I got fleeced. And so, like, my sisters-in-law and my mom and people were telling my brothers and my dad, like, you got to give him his money back. And I was like, no, you can't give me my money back. That would be absolutely wrong. Like, this is rite of passage, right? Like, I lost the money fair and square. That's how it's got to be. And I was thinking of something like that for this character. There's a world where he gets into a poker game with these other young caddies and he takes all their money, right? Mm-hmm. Just like he took these other people's money, this little echo of his main life, and then something inspires him to give the money back.
Doesn't give the money back.
Or he just looks at the money and he cries at the end, right? Like there's some, but there's something in that of like the taking of the money is his thing, and it hits him in some way here at the end of this thing that it's not working for him.
Yeah, or maybe he gets stiffed on a tip on his first loop back, and he was expecting to make $100 a bag and gets maybe 40, 50, and that's his, like, looking at that cash because it's all done in cash. That's the other thing. He doesn't have to pay taxes on any of this money because caddies all do it in cash.
Yeah, but that's not a core thing. The idea, though, that he gets stiffed or he takes advantage of the kids, which is a little on the nose, but it's a good place to start, right? And I think that's right. I mean, if we were bouncing this back and forth, my reaction to Jim would be, all right, that's a little on the nose, a little too neat. How do we stink it up? How do we add some funk to it? I mean,
But there's emotional weight in that in some way, right? Like, this is a guy who's about making money. It's a guy who's been in these kids' shoes. It's a guy who's finding himself back where he was. So what's the punch in that?
I mean, the bad version is, first of all, why does he want their money? And he needs the money because he has no money because he needs this thing from the episode. And he realizes the only way I can make money is to take these kids' money. I mean, again, a little too neat, a little too much of a reflection. But I get there's a show there. There's an episode there for sure. And the thing I want to ask, which is connected to that, is what's his agenda? Because the agenda for the season, if we had a little bit of a driver that way, that might give you a shape. Because I don't think he took this job because it was the only job. I think he, like, for example, he wants to get to one of the executives who are one of the billionaires who are members of this club, so that he can use that person to get back. So I know why that won't sustain. That'll be true for some, but that'll get us in. Now I know what he wants. He really wants to get back. And that way to do it is through that dude. So he's going to start contorting himself in all these adventures, all these stealing from the kids, doing this, whatever he needs to get to that guy in the right situation so he can make his pitch so he can get back.
Yeah.
And then in the end, of course, he doesn't. And if it was a movie, he would realize he's been home all the time, Dorothy. And the thing is, in that, but we won't, you're not doing that. You're staying leaner and more, but it doesn't work, and he's stuck here. And I'm not pitching an episode. I'm maybe pitching a season.
Yeah, no, I'm kind of thinking like the driver of 10 episodes, and there's maybe like a club tournament or some big kind of purse event at the end that he knows if he can get into, and he can get paired up with a player that's really good and get whatever cut of that. It's kind of more to get himself back up to the top. But yeah, in terms of kind of the longevity of it, I don't know. Is there someone after him that, like, someone he screwed over that's trying to?
Well, those are all that's good. Yeah, those are all great episode ideas, right? Or multi-episode arcs. But it's those kind of challenges and drivers and all that. Once you have all that stuff, you're not actually trying to blue sky everything. Now you have a shape. Now you have something you can start draping ideas on and seeing what fits.
When you know his flaw and you know his drive, that gives you a lot.
And then you start actually pitching yourself actual scenes, throwing cards on a wall that look like that, and pretty soon a shape comes to it, and you're not just sitting there thinking, God, I've got infinite possibilities. That is the way to madness. That's when Spock looked into that beam of light that drove everyone insane, and he was able to do it. Am I remembering this right, or is that through a fog of smoke that I've changed it? Well, anyway.
I can smell the smoke.
But yes, infinite possibilities blue sky is fun for a while. And then eventually it'll drive you insane. You got to switch to, yes, this is his driver of this episode. This is the driver of his character for the art, for the season, which will help me figure out more about his character. Let's try some moves. Let's try him doing this, trying that. This is what gets in his way. And it all starts coming into focus. But it's got to be specifics.
Got to reach into that golf bag and get out your driver.
Yeah.
I'd just like to apologize for Jim Dunn today. I don't know if it's the golf thing that's bad, or
I was just trying to tee him up.
His medication is off. Don't laugh, Mark. Mark, stop. Don't. Just
it's all right.
Mark, hit mute on your phone, please. If that.
No, it's okay, Jim. That was a hole in one. So
there we go.
Wow.
There we
now
go.
You're making Jim sound good.
I'm just puttering around.
Oh, no. This is an excellent time to leave this episode. I don't want to talk to either of you anymore. Mark, there's a lot of fun to be had here, and
for sure.
And I kind of wish we were writing this now, because we would be laughing a lot. Which, as far as I understand, laughter in your mind means a moment where you don't hurt. That's how I remember that.
Yeah,
that's how we know you're a writer.
Right.
Yeah.
And really, best of luck with this, man.
Yeah, good luck, Mark.
Oh, thank you so much, guys. Thank you, Sam and Jim, for having me on, and JR. It's been an amazing time. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for being here, man. Be well.
And that's all we've got for you this week. Our producer, J.R. Zamora-Thal, is working the mixing board.
Our logo was designed by Julien Debar-Monclair, and our music was provided by Bouderays out of Austin, Texas.
If you want to get in touch, we are at The Sam and Jim on Instagram and Twitter. And you can find us on Facebook and YouTube as The Writers' Room with Sam and Jim.
And if you like hanging out in the room with us, give us a follow on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
And tell a friend, would you, so we can get JR paid. Thanks, everyone. See you next week.